Tonight's story begins where a border isn't a line, but a mirror. On one side, abandoned break rooms glow like empty aquariums. On the other, new factories thrum like neon reefs. The tariff wall built to trap American industry now guides it. North like a compass gone rogue. Forklifts roll across the Ambassador Bridge at dawn, carrying robot arms still warm with Detroit grease. Canada, once the quiet neighbor, has recast itself as a sanctuary, bundling cheap hydropower, carbon-friendly rebates, and political calm into a welcome pack that feels almost magnetic. If a machine needs a passport to keep breathing, whose anthem will echo over the next shift horn? Tap subscribe, and let's decode the math together. Look beyond the headlines about friendlier taxes, and you'll find a policy engine in Ottawa, writing checks faster than Washington can tweet threats. Hidden in Canada's 2024 budget is a refundable clean technology manufacturing credit. 30 cents back on every dollar of factory equipment that cuts carbon. For a Midwestern auto parts maker living on razor-thin margins, that isn't a perk. It's oxygen. Take Miller Robotics, a 50-year supplier of welding cells outside Dayton. This spring, its CFO opened 2 spreadsheets: stay put and swallow a 25% tariff on imported steel modules, plus surging U.S. electricity, or shift to Windsor, where hydropower flows off river turbines, and the federal credit slashes $8 million from CapEx. One line, net after incentive, flipped from crimson to forest green. 2 weeks later, the company's tool crates rolled over the Ambassador Bridge at 3 a.m., past an American toll booth that suddenly felt like a farewell gate. Dayton's mayor called it betrayal. Windsor's council called it Tuesday. The incentive isn't just rich, it's uncapped through 2031. The longer the firm stays, the deeper the rebate digs into payroll, property levies, even retraining costs. By July, the first Canadian-stamped weld cell was sparking inside a retrofitted dairy plant, powered by nickel-rich batteries made a mile away with matching provincial cash. The plant manager live-streamed that inaugural arc to Ohio friends, captioning, "It, same job, colder beer." His feed filled with emojis, maple leaves from some, broken hearts from others. Washington's answer? Another tariff round that inflates Miller's U.S. input costs, accidentally sweetening Ottawa's sales pitch. The border, once a moat, has morphed into a cashback counter. And each time Congress debates a new duty, Canadian accountants refresh the slide deck waiting for the next restless supplier. If a dollar can still buy loyalty, what happens when a credit buys 2? Shift the camera east to Quebec, where the Saint Maurice River glides under turbines large enough to swallow barns. That water is pure bargaining power. Industrial buyers here pay barely 4 tsakaseks ko per kilowatts, roughly half a Midwestern peak rate. When Alumivolt, an Ohio battery casing startup, priced its new casting line last March, energy was the biggest line item, larger than aluminum itself. The founder opened Hydro-Quebec's rate sheet, blinked twice, then chartered a site visit. To Trois-Rivières, the town's vacant paper mill still smelled of pulp. By August, it thrummed with induction furnaces, their roar funded by cheap water masquerading as electricity. Inside, welders in Canadians' jerseys swap stories with Americans still learning how to pronounce poutine. One laughs that he now earns in Canadian dollars, but saves in U.S. greenbacks. The exchange feels like a personal rebate. Outside, rainbow mist curls over the spillway. Natural smoke machines for a corporate promo video announcing net zero. Aluminum. The marketing sells virtue. The math sells survival. Back in Cleveland, the same kilowatt would cost double and carry a 25% Trump carbon border fee. Managers there renamed the canceled line Project Ice, code for frozen by tariffs. Quebec's hydro grid, meanwhile, is overbuilt. Decades of old dams hungry for customers. Ottawa sweetens the offer with a 12% payroll refund on any job tied to clean energy equipment. Stack that on top of river power, and every shift whistle becomes a metronome counting shareholder gain. Local politicians boast that a megawatt moving north is emissions diplomacy. Ohio union reps call it daylight theft. Yet even they admit the physics. Water falls for free, coal does not. As long as gravity ignores borders, spreadsheets will too. The question haunting Great Lakes foundries is simple. How do you compete with a river that never sends an invoice? Currency can be a tariff in disguise. In 2025, the Canadian dollar has hovered near 75 US cents, gifting every American balance sheet an automatic 25% discount the moment costs cross the 49th parallel. For Crosspoint, Plastics, an Indiana supplier of dashboard vents that spread meant the difference between red ink and record margins. Their controller jokes that the loonie is the rebate Washington forgot to outlaw. But FX is only half the trick. The other half is a treaty. USMCA exempts most finished goods that loop north and back, provided enough value is added on Canadian soil. So Crosspoint now injection molds in London, Ontario, stamps "Made in Canada" on the crate, and sends it straight through the Ambassador Bridge duty-free. No new paperwork, no extra tariff, just a 30-minute pause for customs and a polite bienvenue. The bridge itself has morphed into a corporate bloodstream. More than 1.5 million trucks crossed at Detroit in 2023, nearly one-third of all northern freight. Drivers call the run the yo-yo, out empty, backloaded, twice a day if weather cooperates. Jasdeep Singh, a Windsor hauler, once moved lettuce. Now his trailer hums with EV battery shells bound for a Tennessee line that will never mention Canada in its ad copy. He shrugs. Tariffs change, the bridge stays. Every mile saved on duties or exchange spreads is reinvested in speed. Logistics. Teams pre-file manifests. Warehouses straddle rail spurs that dive south within hours, and Ontario's new express lane for green goods guarantees sub-5-minute inspections if your shipment meets clean tech codes. The loop is so efficient that some Michigan plants now treat Windsor warehouses as off-site stockrooms, cheaper than renting across town. Critics warn the corridor is a single point of failure. Protests in 2022 idled GM and Ford within 48 hours. But boards still vote with calculators, not memories. As long as the loonie stays soft and USMCA stays signed, the fastest path into American showrooms may be the one that leaves the country first. In a game where pennies matter, a quarter on the dollar ITTC Head Start is a siren song, and every diesel note rumbling over the river is another stanza. When balance sheets travel, they pack more than machinery. They haul fear of tomorrow's headline. In Washington, tariff schedules can flip before coffee cools, and a single tweet can shave billions off a share price. North of the line, the cadence is slower, almost metronomic. The World Bank lists Canada in the top quartile for political stability, about 76% in 2023 versus the US stuck near the mid-60s. Investors read that gap like a seismic chart. Fewer tremors, lower insurance, cheaper capital. Caldwell Components, a Kentucky maker of EV heat exchangers, felt the aftershocks when a surprise White House tariff on Chinese nickel wiped 11% off its margins overnight. Their board convened at dawn, laptops glowing red. An analyst flagged a clause in Ottawa's 2020-24 budget guaranteeing 10-year tax rate certainty for for clean tech projects receiving federal credits. Within a month, lease papers were signed on a brownfield site outside Kingston. "We traded uncertainty for snow," the CEO joked, watching Kentucky engineers unpack crates beside Lake Ontario's glass-still water. The move wasn't romance, it was risk arbitrage. Canadian permitting follows a single federal portal, timelines published online like bus schedules. In the States, Caldwell had burned 8 months shuttling between state DEP, county zoning, and a congressional office that changed hands mid-filing. Kingston took 9 weeks, including wildlife surveys and an indigenous consultation that ended with a handshake over cedar tea. Finance chiefs call it Reg Clarity Alpha. Every quarter not lost to paperwork goes straight to EBIT. Pundits warn that Canada faces its own storms, elections, minority governments, but the numbers remain stubbornly steady. Policy may shift, yet the guardrails rarely vanish. For companies whose pulse quickens with each Capitol Hill briefing, that predictability is worth containers of cash. The quieter the parliament, the louder the factory floor. And when volatility itself becomes a hidden tariff, boardrooms will always sail for the calmest harbor on the chart. A factory without people is just an echo chamber, and labor shortages now bite harder than interest rates. Canada's secret weapon is a revolving door that spins fast, but rarely jams. Under the Global Skills Strategy, Specialized Work Permit, applications can clear in as little as 2 weeks. Compare that to the months-long queue for an H-1B lottery or the legal purgatory of U.S. prevailing wage audits. For HR directors on a launch deadline, the choice feels like boarding priority versus standby. When Crossvolt Motors needed battery chemists fluent in solid-state electrolyte recipes, they posted ads in Bengaluru and Manchester with one promise: visa in 14 days, snow boots provided. Arjun Patel, a 32-year-old PhD from IIT, was stamping his passport at Toronto Pearson before his former classmates even received their U.S. RFEs. Within 3 more weeks, he was tweaking lithium salts in a lab overlooking the Grand River. His 20-year story loops across Slack channels as proof that career leaps no longer hinge on a Silicon Valley zip code. The program scales because Ottawa ties speed to accountability. Employers in the global talent stream must craft job creation plans and record wage hikes for locals. Instead of zero-sum, the visa acts like a pump, pulling skill in while pressurizing domestic payrolls. In Windsor, machinist apprentices earn 10% more today than pre-GTS, a quiet dividend seldom mentioned in campaign ads, but obvious in payday lines at Tim Hortons.us. Lobbyists label it talent poaching. Recruiters call it market physics. As long as Toronto tech parks glow with Mandarin, Punjabi, and Glaswegian accents working under the same roof, the innovation gradient tilts north. Machines may cross borders on flatbeds, but minds migrate by opportunity. And opportunity now files paperwork in Ottawa. Each approval code is another neuron grafted onto Canada's industrial brain, firing patents and prototypes back across. The line, tariff-free. When success rides on ideas lighter than aluminum, the fastest gate wins. And right now, the turnstile spins in maple leaf red. A decade ago, the Canada-US border felt porous, a polite formality on the trip to Niagara Falls. In 2025, it's a high-voltage wire. Touch it on the wrong side, and profits arc north in a crackle of incentives: cheap electrons, soft currency, steady politics, and jet-speed visas. We've traced 5 currents that now merge into one magnetic stream, pulling factories, patents, and paychecks into colder air, then looping finished goods back into American garages with duty-free swagger. For Washington, each new tariff meant to bolt doors has become a hinge. For Main Street towns, The exodus sounds like silence at shift change. And for Canada, steady, subsidized, and suddenly central, the question is no longer how many companies will arrive, but whether its own infrastructure can stretch fast enough to greet tomorrow's convoy. Borders may be lines on a map, yet capital sees only gradients. The real anthem playing over the next shift horn? Whichever side turns arithmetic into opportunity first. If unmasking these hidden currents matters to you, hit subscribe, tap the bell, and share which move shocked you most. Because the next spreadsheet-fed migration is already idling at the bridge, engine ticking, waiting for a green light.